Tommy Herschell, how are you, brother?
Mate, I'm good. I'm good. We've sorted out all the lighting issues, mate. So have a look at me. I'm lit up like like I got staph or something. I look sick.
Hey, let me tell you. I'll tell you what you are. You're a good-looking rooster. You've got the look, mate. I think there is something about the work that you do. The reason you're so effective is, I reckon, a lot of people, a lot of Aussies, can see themselves in you. You've got, mate, a bit of a kind of signs of a mullet going on. You
Yeah,
got the
I'm
trucker cap
trying.
on,
Yeah,
mate. You've got the Aussie slang. I love it. I love it. I
mate.
think you're
Yeah,
very relatable.
I got a set of Uncle Keith on me that I wake up some nights and the poachers are there trying to pull them out of my mouth, mate. You could build a set of piano keys out of them. They're that big, but mate, I do my best. The old peepers they're starting to rattle as I get older. Sometimes I look at myself and go, geez, have a look at those pillows under your eyes. But mate, I think that's just all part of growing older and hopefully growing up.
Mate, if you think your nashes are big, you haven't seen my smile, mate. I've got something the size of Luna Park, so send me at a fun park somewhere around Australia. But
Oh,
mate, I'm
beautiful.
I'm I'm really moved by what you do. I first come across your story, and I've actually spoken about you on a bunch of podcasts, and I've spoken about you in depth with my mates, which sounds a little bit odd at the surface. But the reason that I've connected so much with what you do is I can see the genuine compassion and inspiration you have with inside you to want to help people who are going through challenging circumstances. And it seems to me that you're doing a bloody beautiful job. And I actually can't pinpoint anyone who's doing it better than you in Australia right now in reaching these young kids through challenges in their life. I wonder for you, mate, what's the inspiration to do this in the first place? Where does that come from?
Yeah, that's a good question, mate. I was actually only thinking about this like 4 or 5 weeks ago. I was driving home from a workshop, and I've been really lucky to be able to do this breakfast radio slot once a month on a Friday, and with Benny Fordham, he's a ripper, and he always asks me great questions, and he said to me, he goes, "I want you to have a think about exactly what you just said. Why do you do this?" Like, and as I was leaving this school, I was like, all those kids that spoke today, all those kids that got up and they talked and they shared their emotions and they were, getting around each other. They just want to be loved. They want to be heard. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be made to feel safe. They want people around them who are kind and generous and empathetic, which is, what your upbringing should be, what it should be at home. And I, my mum did her absolute best. I was in a pretty interesting home growing up, like my oldies split up at an early age, and I sort of felt that wasn't really there. I mean, my wife's amazing at reminding me that, for our kids, it's not rocket science. We just need to make them feel safe and loved and heard. And I sort of had this moment where I was like, geez, I don't think I ever did feel safe. I don't think I ever felt really heard. I felt like I was in the way. And there was never really any empathy with how I was feeling, with my oldies splitting and my dad living so far away and not being able to see him. And so that wasn't in my life. And I just, and I always, as a school teacher by trade, I was like, I don't want kids to have to go through that. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. And so to be able to go into a school or a corporate situation or a shear and shed like sporting team where I do these workshops, it's not rocket science. Like we were talking before about this, and and the work and people out there who call themselves experts and shit. Mate, I'm just a bloke who's had a bit on, gone through a few things, probably didn't deal with it in the way that I should have, in a grown up, mature way, and I've learnt a hell of a lot along the way, and I'm still learning, and I think that's what inspires me as well. That every time I step into one of these rooms, I meet a kid who teaches me something. And a great example of that, and why this, to make sure I stick to your question, because, mate, I've got something that they call verbal diarrhea, so you might have to pull me up. But I had a kid the other day even inspire me and teach me something. He looked at me and he goes, mate, it was maybe grade 6, I think. He said, what do you love about where you're at on your journey? And I was like, first of all, I was going, what an epic question from a 11-year-old. And I said, mate, I think what I love the most is that I love myself. And he looked at me like, oh, you love yourself? Like, when a young kid says, oh, you love yourself, mate, you sound like a real idiot, like you're on top of yourself. You're you're into yourself, right? But it's obviously a different thing when you love yourself. You care for yourself. When you love anything, you care for it, don't you? Like if you love your push bike, you bloody look after it. You clean it. I love my truck. I clean it. I look after it. I get it serviced. Well, I service it all the time, and I love it and I respect it. And that's what I was saying to this young fella. You know, like one of the proudest things that I am these days is that I love myself. So I set boundaries in and around my priorities. So if I go and have a beer, because I have a beer these days in a healthy way, but if I go and have a beer, I'll just have one or two, knowing that if I have 3, 4, 5, or 6, the next day will be no good. Like I set boundaries, or I'd make sure I'm around people that are going to serve me really well. So people that are going to set a standard, they're going to train hard, they're going to you know, if I am out with them and I'm having a beer, they go, hey, I'm going home because, you know, my family's at home and I've got a big day tomorrow. So, you know, like I get good people around me. But then as well as that, like I guess I sort of act like an adult. And an adult is someone who makes decisions not based around themselves, which is something that I always used to do. It was just always about me. And when I said that to this young fella, I sort of walked away going, geez, I don't think I've even thought about the fact that I care for myself or I love myself. I love myself enough now to look after myself. So yeah, long answer, mate, to your question, but I think that's what I love about it the most. That every time I walk into a room, I'm hanging out with dudes who are either 11-year-old right through to 50-year-old, and I'm learning and I'm growing with them, and I'm having this moment where their lives completely shift. And that's something else. To be in the room with someone when they realise their behaviour's been shitty, but it's been dictated by someone else that's out of their control. They have this incredible light come out of them without sounding too airy-fairy. But yeah, and then to be in the room when someone does that and a young person goes over and goes, oi, I just want to know, you know, that bloody awesome. You know, it's unreal. So yeah, I think that's what keeps me. Well, I know that's what keeps me going. Just every day, every opportunity in a room is new and it's different, and it's a great opportunity for me to be better.
Mate, you can see the words "find your feet" written across that hat of yours. For those that are watching, they'll see that. For those that are listening, it's something to note, and it suggests something that maybe we don't always realize or appreciate at an early point in our life, but rather the fact that at some point in our lives, maybe at some point multiple times in our life, and likely so, that we all lose our feet at times. We all get hit by a setback. We go through a bit of adversity, because that is the uncontrollable nature of life, and that's the beauty of it. When you talk about finding your feet, which is the name of your organization, you know, for you, you spoke about a challenging upbringing where you didn't exactly always feel safe and heard. You know, how did you find that manifest in the kind of adult, the kind of man you become?
Yeah, mate. It's I mean, this is one of the greatest things I learnt from finding my counsellor, who I've been seeing now for nearly 8 years. You know, look, my upbringing was my oldie split when I was 10. My old man chose to move a really long way away. So you know, so many young people out there grew up in a single parent home. And yeah, for me, I just slipped into that pattern of what young fellas do. When I was on my own, I was so scared, I was so lost, I was so hurt, and I was angry. When I was on my own, that's how I felt. But when I was amongst the boys at school, I was loud, I was funny, I was stupid, I was angry, I was all those things that made me feel safe in amongst the group, that made me feel like I was fitting in. I was looking for all of these sort of validations through my mates, but they were just coming in such unhealthy ways. And I wasn't stopping, and I wasn't being able to say, hey, boys, like, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm struggling with. And in my eyes, that's how you find your feet. You know, you stop and you're able to go, boys, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm under the whip. But because I didn't have those skills or tools, or because it's not really part of the culture, I never did it. And it never happened for me. And I just went through through those early years doing that at school, number one smartass, loudest bloke all the time, this, that, and the rest. And then when I finished up school, I actually had a really good woodwork teacher in year 10, and he came over to me and, I used to lead the boys into awful shit. Like Crackers was his name. I gave him the nickname Crackers, Johnny Keneally, one of the greats. And, we'd do stuff like he'd be walking down the path. We could see him coming to the woodwork room, and we'd all run and hide underneath the room. And he'd be yelling out, "Where are you blokes?" And we'd be hiding under the building. Like we were just out of control, smart asses and rude to him. And he came up to me one day when I was yelling out stuff at him. And he goes, "Oi," he goes, I reckon you could do something with your voice one day instead of being a dickhead all the time." And he just walked away. And I remember going, "Oh, wow, that's a compliment. Like that's the first person who's seen through my bullshit. Or everyone used to see through my bullshit, but that's the first person who's actually pulled me up on it." And it just made me think. And I actually went in my head, I went, you know what, I want to be a chalky. I want to be a school teacher one day, like Crackers. Like, that was gold. It was only like about 12 months later. I'm driving around Chugan where I grew up in my car illegally. I got this little Datsun 1000 and saw Crackers pinballing out of the pub, and I pulled up next to him and said, "Oi, Crackers, you want a lift, mate? You had a few beers." And he was like, "Oh, give me a lift," and got in the car, and I drove him home. And I sat at home with him in his house, and mate, he just sat there and he told me about how he'd never been married. He'd always wanted kids. He'd had his heart broken. And it was incredible to sit with this older fella while he was open and vulnerable and honest. And I could let my guard down too and just be like, "Oh, I don't have to bullshit in front of this bloke." Mate, Crackers stayed a really good mate right through until, I still see him every time I'm up home, when I'm up home on the Gold Coast. But, that sort of behaviours, that loud, rude, yelling shit, that followed out of school into alcohol and the parties and being able to just drink all the time. Because, when you drink, you can be loud and rude, and you can be angry. You can tell your mates you love them, and the next day, you can ring them and go, "Oh, sorry, mate, I tell you I love you, this, that, the rest." And they go, "Hey, it doesn't matter, you're pissed," like I had that as an excuse. And so, mate, my drinking was pretty out of control, like I was 10 to 12 beers a day, man, for 10 or 12 years, a really long time. And, mate, I had a job working in surf journalism, traveling the world, this beautiful, glamorous job, not much money, but traveling around, and I'd surf perfect waves all day and hang out with my heroes. And then at night I'd cry myself to sleep, or I'd get so drunk that I messed up somewhere. And mate, I explained to the young fellas, like I just never found my feet. I never stopped and thought about my behaviours. And while I was doing that, all my laundry was piling up. All my stuff was piling up. There's that saying, don't air your laundry, or we shouldn't have aired our laundry. Well, if we don't, what happens is what happened to me. It just piles up and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what was happening for me. I got to 32. I'd met my awesome wife, and my kids were born. They were only young, but I met this champion guy called Bastian Margel. He was 15 and a half. I was working in radio in Sydney. I was like a functioning alcoholic, lunatic, egomaniac. Mate, he was 15 and a half. He was genuine. He was selfless. He was just his own man, and I was all the opposite. But a young girl was walking around 2UE where I was working, and she was selling chocolates. I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" She said, "Fundraising for this young fella." Told me his story. And I said, "I'd love to meet him." Mate, he'd been wrongly diagnosed for like 6 weeks. He'd been playing rugby league and got a cork in his leg. His mum took him to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Look, it's just a cork, you're right." And for 6 weeks that happened, until eventually she said, "Look, we're not leaving until you tell us what's going on." And they did some scans, came back 3 or 4 days later, and mate, he had Ewing sarcoma, really aggressive form of cancer. And the doctor's like, "Look, you've got 4 to 6 months to live." And mate, in that 6 months that I was hanging out with him, and like he was had his mates around, he was just an incredible bloke. Like I watched him in certain situations where his mates were being dickheads, and he would just walk away. Other times when he was like they were being dickheads, he'd pull them up. He'd go, "Oi, boys, like, what are we doing? We're better than that." And I was just watching him going, "Wow, I'm 32 and I don't act like that. I act like his mates, that have been lunatics." And mate, he went to bed on the night of his 16th birthday and he didn't wake up until the Monday morning. And when he woke up, his liver was shut down. He's starting to go blind, and just an amazing young fella. He didn't talk really for the last 3 days. He sort of gave a few sentences, and one of them was on the Wednesday when he passed. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He said to his mum and dad, "I want you to take me out in the backyard, and I want to touch the earth with my feet one more time." And his mum tells the story that he looked off and into the sun, and then looked back at her and said, "Tell my mates to love life, mum, and don't waste it. Like, just enjoy it. I can't be here anymore, but tell them, you know." And he passed away that night at 6 o'clock. And when his mum Claire rang me and told me at 6:30, Tommy passed half an hour ago. I want to let you know, mate. I was sitting there. I was already drunk. I'd been arguing with my wife about how messy things were. I've been arguing with the kids like they're only 2 and 5 about the noise, like just all this shit. And I wasn't loving life. I was wasting it. I was playing the victim. But it wasn't till another 3 years really down the track till I completely capitulated and completely fell over and found my feet, I guess. But yeah, I was sort of sitting even where I'm sitting right now, and 2 fellas were telling me I need to see a kinesiologist, I need to do this and that, and I just clicked. My laundry pile had gotten way too big. All the stuff that I was dealing with, or not dealing with, I should say, had piled up, and I just sculled a bottle of red wine, threw it across the room, and trashed the house pretty much till about 3:30 in the morning, and yeah, it just caused a heap of chaos. And mate, it was about 3:30 in the morning. I'm underneath the house and I'm banging my head against the wall, and I was saying, I want to go home to Queensland, and I want my mummy. That's what I was saying. And I was 35, and my wife was like looking at me from across the room, going, like, where's this man? Like, where's a man in this situation? Like, what's going on with this guy? Like, I was just broken, and she'd put up with this sort of behaviour for so long, and I just never stopped and found my feet. And I always had a mate that I'd ring all the time when I was playing the victim, and she said, "Ring him now." And I rang him, and down the phone I was crying. No one knows what it's like. No one cares. And he just said, "Mate, F off. Don't ring me like this anymore, mate. I'm done with it." He's like 20 or 30 years older than me, and 30 years he is exactly, actually. And he said, "Don't ring me like this anymore. I'm done with it. Ring me tomorrow when you're sober. I love you. I love your wife and your family. I love your kids." He goes, "Most importantly though, mate, I love you, and I love myself, and I love myself enough to not let people like you just play the victim in front of me. And I want you to pull yourself out of this. So ring me tomorrow." And it was unbelievable. I hung up the phone and I went, wow. I went to bed. Next morning I woke up and I tried to pretend nothing had happened, but this was it. The laundry pile was built up, and luckily I went into this place in Sydney. They sent me to this lady called Elizabeth, who's an amazing old lady, and who's been my counsellor for so long. And one of the first things I said to her was like, "Elizabeth, why was I banging my head against the wall saying I want mummy and I want to go home to Queensland?" And she said, "Because, darling, you're 35 years old, but you've never dealt with what happened to you when you're 10. Like, you've never stopped and dealt with what you were going through. You've never spoken about it. You've never worked on any of it. You've just pushed it off to the side." She said, "So you behave like a wounded boy. Everything that happens in your life, if you don't agree with it, you stomp your feet, you cry, you behave like a wounded child." She said, "My job is to get you acting and behaving like a functioning adult." And mate, it was one of the most amazing moments. And for me, that was when I completely found my feet. I stopped and went, right, I got work to do here. I remember, mate, a week later, I was speaking at some function in the city, and everyone was clapping and cheering and in tears. And I sat down, and thankfully, my wife looked at me and said, "Nah, you're not off the hook here, mate. With me, like, you've got so much work to do. Yeah, like, you've got so much to make up for." And that's been one of the things that's been such a driving force in finding my feet, and knowing and grateful to have someone like her in my life, that it doesn't stop the minute you walk into a counsellor. If anything, that's the start. Like, that's the first day. And like you said before, like, you find your feet, and then there's days, mate, when I want to go back to the pub and drink 10 beers. But if I know I do that for the next 3 days, I'll be as anxious as a bag of cats at a greyhound meet, and I'll only end up in strife. So yeah, that whole phrase of finding your feet, you know, Bastion helped me find my feet that day when he passed, and he left me with those words: love life, don't waste it. You know, I've told that, I reckon, over 50,000 young people now, or people around Australia. Um, and then also my mate pulling me up, you know, that helps me to find my feet. And then my wife being who she is, that helps me to find my feet. And now the blokes that I spend time around, you know, I always say to young people, I was the bloke who used to get home at 2 a.m. after drinking 20 schooners. And now I'm the bloke who gets up at 2 a.m. and I run 20 Ks, because I've got mates who do that, and that's what they expect of their mates. So yeah, mate, it's the saying, find your feet. It's about, lots of young kids sort of, they think of it in different ways. They go, you know, you get the odd smart ass I love, they go, oh, it's on the end of your legs, mate. But then you get a legend who go, oh, it's about finding structure, or it's about finding stability. Yeah, it is. That's what finding your feet means to you. That's what it is. It's about finding a plan. Yep, I like that. For some people, it's about being able just to stop every now and again and go, you know what, I need 3 hours off. I'm just going to stop, find my feet, recalibrate, work out who I am, and work out my values and go at it. It's when the boys are sitting around school and they start to yell out things to the girls and they start to behave in ways that they shouldn't. Being able to find your feet is going, hey, fellas, it's not what we do. For the fella who can't talk in front of a group and is scared to do that, or they're in an unsafe situation, finding your feet is simply standing up and walking away. So, mate, for a lot of people, it means a lot of different things. But that's what I love as well, that for some people it's this and for some people it's that.
Mate, you tell a beautiful yarn, and there was a couple of incredible moments in that story, and I love that you've shared some of those things so much. And I think one of the key things for me, one of the key standouts, is the challenge of being a good man when we talk about being a support for our mates, being a support for our partner, being a support for anyone who's in our life who needs it, and even for ourselves, is sometimes you have to cut the bullshit and be really honest. Sometimes you have to be in an uncomfortable situation and call it what it is to really truly help the person that you're trying to get to. And I know times in my life where people have called me out on my bullshit, and sometimes in the moment you do not want to hear it, but you go, that's what I needed.
Yeah,
I need
exactly,
someone to
mate.
say it straight.
Yeah, there's a big part in the workshop that I do, where I say to the boys, all right, what do these two lines mean? And one is don't dog your mates, and the other one is take a risk. And they'll say, oh, don't dog your mates is, you know, don't snitch if your mates. And I go, well, don't snitch. What do you mean? Oh, if they're doing stupid shit, or if they're drinking, or they're doing drugs, you just don't snitch on them, you know. And then you get some pelican yell out something from behind, you know, and I go, all right, okay, well, what's take a risk mean? Oh, I do stupid stuff. Oh, what do you mean stupid stuff? Oh, to impress the boys, you know, we do, you know, doughies, and, you know, you might buddy talk up a bird that you've been with. All right, okay, yeah. So why are you doing that? Oh, we want to fit in. We want to be one of the boys. Wow, I like this boy. And you always get that. They always give you that. And I go, you know what, though? Let's turn that around. I say to them, find your feet. It's all about giving you a platform to tell your story and listen to others' story, skills to own your stuff, and the skills to empathise with other people's stuff, and then the tools to shift the culture that's been going on, which is just push it aside and get on with it, you know, which is what we grew up with. And then I say, if you've got a mate that's a good mate and you love him, and if he's doing stupid shit, if he's drinking heaps of piss, if he's doing drugs, if he's a gun footy player or musician or academic, whatever, if he's just your mate and he's a good bloke, and if he's doing stupid shit and you don't say something to him, aren't you dogging him? And mate, they all, like, their jaws drop and they go, and I go, have a think about it. Have you got a mate in the room here that you've ever pulled up on shitty behaviour? Because it takes, and I go to the next line, I go, it takes a risk to do that. You know, but a good bloke's going to do it. And what he's risking is the fact that the bloke's not going to be able to meet him where he's at. And he's going to go, oi, mate, piss off. I'm not interested, you know. You're snitching on me. You're this or that. But a good, solid mate's going to go, no, I'm not. Like my mate did. I love you. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And being able to give those young blokes that understanding. And, you know, a lot of this stuff is what I learnt growing up under tables in pubs, with my old man and older men in my life. Like I was like that. That was the old school way that a lot of kids grew up underneath pubs at the Crumman Hotel or the Chugan pub or the Chugan Footy Club, and every now and again I'd see a behaviour that I really loved, and that was one of them. Blokes being able to go, "Oi, like, what are you doing, mate? Pull your head in. You're being a dickhead." And there was old school language, but it was also this old school approach, and I love that, and I'm trying to bring that into this world where, mate, we're going and telling blokes they're toxic. We're telling blokes that they're this and they're that, and they shouldn't do this and they shouldn't do that. And fellas just going, "Oh, like, back off. You got your foot on the throat." What I want to be able to do is give them an opportunity just to be better blokes, and not tell them they're bad at this or bad at it, because I still do some of the same things. And then people say, "Well, okay, well, how do you have those conversations?" And I reckon I reckon there's one great way of doing it. We always walk into a place and go, "How you going?" "Yeah, good. Yeah." Instead of going, "Oh, how you going, mate?" Because you look like shit. Like, what's going on? You look like you're struggling. And you're allowed to use that language. We should be allowed to use that language. Anyway, I say to the boys, I remember a day going in school on a Monday, and I went in. All the boys are there, and I saw an awesome opportunity just to be a funny bastard, because I was feeling so shitty because my old man didn't come down on the weekend from far north Queensland down to the Goldie to visit. He did what he normally did and was like, "Oh, I can't make it. I'm sorry." And break my heart. Walked in and the boys like, "How you going?" And they called me Unit. That was my nickname. "How you going, Unit? Loose Unit." And yeah, good boys, buddy. Went down the footy club Friday night, caused chaos. Someone said, "Steal a carton of piss." I did it, buddy. We rocked roofs in Chugan, had a hell time. And I remember everyone pissed themselves laughing, and I was like, "Oh, I'm good here. I'm on. This is good." And everyone left except for one guy, Macca, Jay McDermott, one of the greats. And he was grade 12, but everyone left, and he looked over and he goes, "Tommy, what are you doing, man? Come over here." And I went and sat with him, and he goes, "Mate, that's shit. Chugs is your hometown. You're throwing rocks in Chugs. Like, mate, footy club, you're stealing piss from Chugs footy club. Like, what are you doing?" He said, "Mate, what happened on the weekend?" And I said, "Oh, Macca, yeah, far out, mate." He said, "Mate, my old man was meant to come down on the weekend. He didn't. But he broke me hard. I was angry. Went down the footy club, made a heap of shit decisions and choices, and went home. And my mum was pissed off because I wasn't home and at the right time, and pretty much yelled at her because I didn't know how to tell her I was angry about Dad. And yeah, mate, I've just got a heap of anxiety, to be honest, at the moment. I'm rattled. And he goes, "Well, mate, look, I drive to school." He said, "I'm going to pick you up on Monday. And, mate, we're going to start driving every day. I'm going to drive to school and check in on you. Mate, I'm here for you. I love you." He goes, "I've got some shit going on too, but I love you, mate. You're a good bloke, but, I'm worried about you acting like a dickhead." And I remember going, what a legend. And I say to young fellas in the workshop, I go, "What's the difference between that first conversation and the second one?" And they say, "Well, the first one, you're just pretending everything's good. You're just saying, yeah, all good. The second one, though, you're letting someone in. And when you let someone in, you're giving them an opportunity to put a plan around you, a structure around you. You're letting a good mate go, 'Oi, buddy, mate, I've got that same shit going on. Like, let's do this together, so you're not on your own." And I put it into sporting terms. Nico Hines is an ambassador of mine. He's a ripper, and I say, imagine when Nico came up from Melbourne. The morning before he gets on the plane, he does a run around the tan, and he does something to his knee, and he gets up and he doesn't tell anyone at Cronulla. They go and do sand hills, and he blows his knee out. He misses the whole season. But if he's got the ability, he'll go, "Hey, guys, I've got to be honest, I've bloody done my knee. I'm struggling a bit." He gets off the plane, good old, they take him down, and he's in the rehab group. They scan his knee. They put a plan in around him, and they support him. And, yeah, he might miss 4 or 5 weeks of footy, but he comes out, and he's better for the experience. He's a better player. And it's the same with us. Like, if we can get in with our mates, give them a support plan, look after them, before you know it, they'll be running marathons, like I did last year after hanging out with Andy Reid, who's one of the greats, who, just sets a standard. You just become better for it by being honest and being real. So, again, mate, I'm not sure if I went it 4 times around the roundabout then, but I hope I got off at the right time.
Mate, with your track record, you're allowed to go around the roundabout as many times as you like, because it's always valuable when you come back around. So Mate, I have to say, to me, it's so important you're saying this, because I mentioned to you just off camera before, I spoke at a school today. We spoke to a year 8 group, then a year 9, and then a year 10 group. So 3 1-hour talks, me and one of my good mates, Brett Canellan. We both have these very different and unique stories, but we speak a lot about how, regardless of your experience, regardless of the adversity you face, you can respond to it in positive ways. You can show up in your life. You can show up for people around you. We speak about the process of achieving goals and overcoming challenges, and how important that thing that you just spoke about, support, actually is. And it's so interesting, mate, because I think for these young fellas in particular, and there's a lot of guys who listen to this podcast, they're really at a crossroads at the moment, because one side of them is being absolutely attacked for being a bloke, and they feel guilty for being a bloke, and they feel guilty for walking through the world as a man, and that shouldn't be the case. And on the other side there's a little bit of accountability, and sometimes a lack of action that is required from these young lads to make improvements and changes in their life and in the culture. And it's finding the balance of not making them the problem, or not making the problem theirs, but giving them opportunities to stand up and be the best versions of themselves and be really functionable, good men in society. And that's why I think what you're doing is so important. When you speak about all of these ambassadors who have become a part of the Find Your Feet movement, I know the Marsh brothers are heavily involved. Nico, mutual mate of ours, Keegan Hipgrave. These guys, they've done a beautiful job of, in their positions of power and influence, and with their backgrounds of success in the sporting world, they've done an incredible job of finding the courage to be vulnerable and taking some ownership for using their skill set to help other people. How did these guys become a part of the movement, and how has this all been connected?
Yeah, mate. Again, so Matty Hayden was the first cab off the rank, and he's just a ripper, Matty. I was at a conference in, mate. I was at what's the old mate's name who's got those planes? Branson, his joint, mate. It was like 4 days of almost the old Tommy came out. I just had the time of my life. But when we finished up at this conference, I was at the airport, and this bloke said to me, he goes, "Mate, I reckon I know someone who could help you out with what you're doing." And I said, "Mate, awesome." And he goes, "Matty Hayden." I said, "Mate, I'm a Queenslander. I bloody love the man. He's got a house just 2 doors up from Jesus. In my mind, he's the best." And anyway, text Matty, and Matty writes back within 10 seconds, like, "Mate, what are you doing hanging around with Victorians for?" He said, "Tommy, Damo's a lunatic." He said, "I'll be home from India in 6 weeks. When I get home, I'm going to call you. I want to know what you're up to." Mate, it was amazing. 6 weeks later, I get this phone call, have this conversation. Another week later, I'm on my way to Brisbane because he wants to go to Stratty, where he's got a house, and he wants to learn all about Find Your Feet and spend 3 days with me. I'm just like, mate, this is incredible. Like, just one of the most beautiful men on earth, Matty Hayden. He's just a special bloke. Sort of bloke you get up at 4:30 in the morning and you sit there for an hour and a half before the sun comes up, and you have 2 cups of coffee, and you don't say much, but you're both sitting there, like both he and I sit there going, we're going fishing, we're going surfing, then we're going fishing again, then we're going surfing, and then we're going to cook, then we're going to have a beer, then we're going to, like, he just lives every minute. He wishes there was 25 hours in a day. But mate, we just sat for these 3 days. But one of the most epic things he did was, he said, "Mate, you got to have purpose, you got to have a drive, you got to have something that's the spine of this." And one day, I don't know what happened, I just out of nowhere, I came up with that, what I said to you before, we give you a platform to tell a story. Skills to own their stuff, and then the tools to shift that culture. And that's got to run through everything we do, right? Being genuine and soul of the earth, that's got to run through everything we do, like the human that Matty is. And Matty came to a workshop and sat at the back, and I didn't introduce him as Matt Hayden, Australian cricketer. I just introduced him as a mate of mine, Matty from Brisbane. And the boys were looking at him going, and they were whispering, and Matty, the bloke that Matty is, he loved that. He didn't need to be put up on a pedestal. So then he introduced me to Marshy, to Mitch. I was on a surf trip in Indo, and Mitch was going to be there. So like, I paddle out one day, and Mitch is out there. I make a golden stuff up and say, "Mate, because he says, what's the work all about?" And I said, "Mate, it's almost, preparing blokes for things you've just been through, how we're going to deal with it." And he goes, "What I've just been through?" And I said, "Yeah, with your dad dying." He goes, mate, my old man didn't die. And I said, Rod Marsh. And he goes, mate, that's not my dad. My dad's Jeff Marsh, Swampy. And we had this awesome laugh. But he looked at me and he goes, mate, whatever I can do for you, like, let me know. On board, he was an ambassador, you know, within a couple of hours. And same with Nico. I reached out to Nico, mate, early doors, or at the same time as Maddie. And Nico was like, mate, whatever I can do, like, I want to help you. I didn't meet Nico for 3 years. But I would ring him and go, hey, mate, I've got this kid who's threatening to take his own life. He's freaking out. We've had a doctor with him. He's going, but can you send me a video message? Mate, within an hour, Nico would send through a 6-minute video. But Nico wouldn't, unlike the rest of the work ambassadors, he wouldn't sit there and go, mate, I'm sorry, poor you, poor this. He'd say, hey, mate, I've been in the same boat. And he'd tell a story about his mum. And he'd tell a story about how hard it was, you know, when she wasn't around for that time when she was in jail. And he'd be honest and open and vulnerable. And that's what it is across all of these ambassadors. They're genuine, they're real, mate. Find your feet. There's no red carpet with what I do. Mate, I don't do red carpet myself personally. You know, I'm from Chugan. We show up to weddings in thongs and shorts. But the ambassadors have to be able to, they have to want to get their hands dirty. So, you know, like Mitch Marsh, I had him in a workshop the other day on the Gold Coast, and he walked in. And I said to the boy, as he walked in, there's about 150 in the room, girls and boys. And I said, hey, there's a buddy West Aussie up the back. Don't worry about him. He'll just sit up there. He's just interested in the work. He's a mate of mine, Mitch. You may have recognised him. He doesn't mind playing cricket around a bit. And the boys are going, they're doing all of that. And if I go in and I set him up and I have him down the front, and I go, hey, this is Mitch Marsh, Australian cricket captain, you know, played 100 tests, hit so many hundreds, boom. Mitch is going like this, right? And by the end of it, they're all looking up at him like that. And he's on a pedestal. And you get a kid in there who's had the life kicked out of him, had the guts kicked out of him. He's sitting there going, I'm never going to get to that. Like, that guy's got a perfect life. He's got everything good for him, and they switch off. Whereas I don't want him to think like that. I want him to be able to look at Mitch as in Mitch is just Mitch, which he is, right? He's just a ripper of a human. He went and sat up the back of this room. The workshop was incredible. This kid got up, young fella, little fella, and he talked about getting bullied and teased for his height. And he goes, look, I can't control what others do and say to me. He said, but I can control what I say and what I do to others. He said, so I don't swear. And I do my absolute best to treat everyone the way that I want to be treated. It was unbelievable. Mitch is like tears falling out of his eyeballs. And this bloody young fella down the front who looks like he just fell out of the Edinburgh pub, he turns around and goes, mate, that was the most unbelievable effing thing I've ever seen and heard. I've seen you around school. I've even given you shit for your height. And, well, aren't I a dickhead? And aren't you the bloody legend? Wow, mate, you're a champion. Bloke walked up, shook his hand. Next bloke gets up in this activity and he starts talking about how his brother's an ice addict. He started talking about how one day he's like, I just had enough with all the trauma and stuff in the family. So he said, I put my head in a noose and I went to roll the chair over and my mum yelled out my name and said, where are you? He said, I took my head out of the noose and he said, I ran into my mum's room and he said, I just fell out of bed and I just cried for 4 or 5 hours and I just got everything off my chest. He's saying this in front of his whole grade, boys and girls. And he said it was in that moment when, you know, I found my feet. He said, I found where I was at and what I needed to do. And he said, I now know I can be me. It was incredible. His mates got around him. There's all this hugging emotion. Mitch is up the back just like bawling his eyes out. And I wrapped it up safely. And I said, hey, look, you know what? Not often you get the Australian captain in the room. Get down here, Marshy. And Mitch came down and he was just locked on this kid and he pushed through everyone. And in front of everyone, he went over and he said to this kid, hey, mate, I just want you to know that that was the most inspiring thing I've ever seen and one of the toughest things I've ever seen. You know, this is what Find Your Feet's about. That workshop for Mitch was just as valuable as it was for that young kid who did what he did. And then also there's that young kid will never forget that moment that he shared with the Australian captain. Every time he sees Mitch go out and hit 100 or play cricket or speak, he'll go, oh, I had a moment with that fella, like he's a champion. Instead of if Mitch just spoke to him, they go, oh yeah, he came into our school, that bloke. Yeah, we got a photo with him. You know, like they know something about Mitch. They know something about his character and his personality. Same thing happened with Nico at school here in Sydney. A kid got up and talked about bullying, and I said, "Mate, what an opportunity for whoever did it to you to own it." And he goes, "Nah, don't worry about it, Tommy. They made their bed; they can sleep in it." Nico jumps straight up and goes, "Oh, Tommy told me not to say anything, just to sit and watch. But boys, I can't do that. This is one of the most unbelievable things I've seen. Your courage, your bravery is amazing. This is what I went through." And this kid just jumps in. He goes, "Aren't you Nico Hines?" And Nico goes, "Mate, it doesn't matter who I am. Like I'm like you guys. I've got stuff and I've had stuff." And that's the purpose of these ambassadors. Like, as much as it's amazing to have their profile and them on board in that sense, but what's even more amazing is when you get a guy like Sean Marsh, who's one of the most beautiful, special humans on earth, who now is mentoring a bloke in West Oz who's, one of the Australian under-18 water polo players we did a workshop with, and Sauce goes and has a cuppa with him, and they just talk about stuff, and they do this, this awesome role that, this young guy's, mate, he lost 4 uncles to suicide, and he lost his old man to suicide, and he stood up in this workshop and said, "Boys, like, I myself suffer a heap of anxiety and I have panic attacks," and he was unbelievably honest, and Sean just jumped up and was like, "Mate, you're me. Like, that's what I went through." Mate, so yeah, they have these one-on-one moments, which is special. Majak Dor, who's played in North Melbourne, he does the same with a young fella up on the Gold Coast. Dale Finucane introduced me to this young fella who's, every day is a battle for him, but he's unbelievably honest with where he's at. I do a workshop called Beyond the Wicket with Sean Marsh, and as I've mentioned, Sean, used to suffer, or still does, anxiety and panic attacks. He had this kid get up and talk about anxiety and panic attacks, not knowing that Sean had experienced that. Sean again jumped up and was like, "Mate, you're one of the most incredible kids." And he said to him, "If I was able to do what you've just done at 15, he said, my cricket career would have been completely different." And one kid goes, "Hang on, like, we thought you'd be an immortal because what you achieved." And he goes, "Boys," he goes, I spent my whole career worrying about what everyone was thinking of me. He said, people used to think I was arrogant because I'd walk straight past them. When they call out my name, I'd struggle to speak to them. He goes, "But I'm not arrogant at all. I'm just bloody scared of stuff, and I've got that anxiety." And, he said, "For you guys to talk about it now, though, completely turns it around." So, mate, yeah, I mean, long answer again to a question, but the beauty of those ambassadors is so young people can look at them, look who they are, look at the platform that society puts them on, and realise that that's all bullshit. They're just people who have been through a shit ton of stuff, and they've just taken it on. Like Kai Hurst, throw in Hursty one last time. Like, Kai's one of my best friends who's been through absolute hell. He lost so much in his teenage years, and then at 17, goes on and wins the Uncle Toby's, and becomes one of the greatest watermen of all time. And, when that guy tells his story, he's so incredibly humble and down to earth. Young people have this thing go off in their head. They go, "Shit, I can do it. I'm capable of doing it." I too come from that. I too have that in my story. Awesome. I'm going to go after it, So, yeah, again, mate, hopefully that answered a long answer, but yeah, they're all champions.
Mate, you know what is so special about this is these kids, and I love hearing the stories you tell about these young fellas and young girls who are stepping up and sharing their story and being honest and being vulnerable, because I don't think they ever realise how inspirational they are, because they don't hear it at school every day, and they don't hear it in their friend groups every day. And, mate, my mate Brett and I, who I spoke with today, we had one earlier in the year at Kiama High down the coast here. And, mate, I remember leaving that day, and right at the end, we'd ask some of the kids if they wanted to come up and ask questions or have a little yarn post that we're going to stick around for a while. And we ended up sticking around for probably an hour. And I had these 3 kids who come up and had a yarn with me. And, mate, they really, really touched my soul. Like, when I tell you, they were telling me some of their experiences and some of the struggles that they have. One young girl was really struggling with epilepsy, and, she was devastated by the fact that, the chance to go and get a license and start driving so she could be more social with her mates had just been pulled away from her. There's another youngster who was just saying, she said, I don't even know what to say to you, mate. But she said, God, it felt so nice to hear you talk and to be honest. And she was crying her eyes out. And she said, I just want to thank you so much. But there's one young girl, I watched her sort of hover around the back of this group, waiting for a chance to come up and speak. And she had a couple of mates around her, and what looked like maybe it was a boyfriend or a male mate of hers who was standing by her side. And she was asking me these really shallow, surface level questions. And I noticed she just kept looking out of the corner of her eye and like was looking for an opportunity for her friends to kind of drift away so she could ask me something one-on-one. And as the last of her mates sort of drifted away, she just broke down in tears immediately, and I could see the tears rolling down her face. And I just felt for her straight away. And she said, "Oh, how do you keep going when you feel like no one understands?"
Yeah.
And I remember, mate, how much it crushed me to see her in so much pain. And we had a little chat, and I got in the car, mate, and I cried my eyes out on the way home, because I called my mate Brett on. I said, "Mate, I don't think we'll ever realise how lucky we are to be face to face with these kids."
Yeah.
And I don't think they'll ever realise how much they inspire us, because, mate, I left there feeling so charged by the fact that, God, I'm bloody privileged to have a chance to chat to these kids and hopefully allow them to recognise some of the good that's within inside of them that hasn't been applauded yet, mate. And so,
Yeah.
I ask you the question, like, what do these kids do to allow you to reflect on yourself and the journey that you're on in your life right now?
Oh, mate, the number one thing I do is eliminate age out of it, Like I'm 43, they're 11 through to, 18 in the school environment. And then, I do workshops with blokes, that are my age and above. And mate, it's just, I think, this ability to, like we were talking about before, this people who call themselves experts and perfect and, bloody bloke whisperers, like, it's just the greatest load of bullshit on earth. Because you're shutting down. Hey, look at this. This is my little offsider. Killer.
Hey,
Fastest
did you
dog
say
on the pit
killer?
water in 27. 17 years old. She's on fire, the old girl. I'll put her over there.
Look at her go. Look at her go.
Yeah. Mate, it's being able to, I think where a lot of people can go wrong with these workshops and this stuff is they're doing it for themselves in a way. Like they're looking for this emotional stuff, and the minute that a young person shares something in a workshop, like, I had a young girl in a rural town. She talked about being, sexually abused in grade 3, and the woman behind her started to howl, like, in tears, and I looked at her and I said, "Wow, like, where do you get the strength to get up and speak about what you've been through? Because you're an incredibly strong person." And she was just like, "What?" Like, wow. She was like, "Yeah, I haven't really thought about that." It hadn't really entered into her mind of being celebrated for speaking about it, because normally it's like, well, just hold on to it or do it yourself, and push it aside. And her ability to do that opened up 3 or 4 more in the room. A dude got up and he spoke to her and he said in front of everyone, he goes, if I've ever made you feel intimidated, if any other man in this community's made you feel intimidated, I'm sorry, and we're going to do everything in our power now to make sure that you feel safe and secure. And she just gave him this huge hug, and everyone got up and given her a hug except for one girl who sitting next to me, and you could tell that she sort of, sort of been, life had kicked her pretty hard. And I'll never forget, everyone sat down, it was quiet for about a minute, and she stood up and she said to this kid, like, this boy, like, "You're every bit the man that one day, like, I want to be with, I want to marry." Like, that's what I see a man, someone who's got their ability to get up and make someone feel safe and heard. And, like, if I can't walk away from that going, hey, have I ever made someone feel unsafe, like a woman, or do I still, do I make my wife ever feel that way? And have this moment of, like, okay, reflection or looking in the mirror, then I'm not living or I'm not doing the work. This isn't a business, it's a service. I'm not a man of faith or anything like that. I certainly believe in a higher power, but this is a service of going out there and meeting people and learning with people and growing with people. You know, there's the old line I always use: when you go out and speak to people, they switch off, but when you speak with them, they switch on. You know, that's when they're like, "Whoa, this is awesome. We're all in the same boat." Yeah.
Mate, you couldn't have said it better yourself, and it's making me reflect here on, the way that I show up in the world. And there's something beautiful I heard the other day, that the minute you identify that you have anything figured out, the minute that pigeonhole yourself to be one thing in the world, the minute that you almost block yourself off from the opportunity of growing, learning, hearing, connecting, becoming anything that you could become in your life, the minute that you've lost the race, that life is really about opening yourself up to learning, to becoming, to being present with that. And mate, one of my biggest challenges is sometimes I'm so fixated on what I'm trying to become and the kind of man I'm trying to be, that anytime I fall short or I feel like I'm falling short of that, I can be so harsh on myself and almost be such a critic of myself that it is a little bit destructive at times. And so I'm trying to remind myself that where I fall short, and a lot of the times it's in my career, mate, I'm such an ambitious person and, trying to be the absolute best I can be, that sometimes it's really hard for me to accept anything that maybe I consider ordinary in my own eyes. And just reminding myself that life's so much bigger than that.
Mate, it's the ability to not switch off to anyone or anything in this field, like with what we're doing. It should be doors open, walls down, right? I've worked in organisations that like walls up, and this is our IP, and we've got to do this, and this, and I share what I've built with a mate in Perth who's doing this sort of stuff. My mate Zach, he shares what he knows with, and we all grow and learn from it. And the point I'm getting to is you put up something the other day, and I'm not sure it was if you'd written it or you just said it, but you said something about you love when you hear blokes giving their missus a rap or not acknowledging their missus. And that's something, mate, that I've only done in the last few years, and probably only strongly in the last 6 months. And it's made a huge difference for me. It's probably that functioning adult thing, being able to realise that the world's bigger than yourself, and who are those people in your world, but just this beautiful element, of being married and having that partnership. And a partnership is so much more than, the feathers and a fine wine. But yeah, like I really love that. And I always say to young crew, like, they're the 1%ers. They're the notes. A mate of mine, Craig, always calls them the notes in between. If you're in a sporting team, it'd be the 1%ers, the little things. But, being able to be, like, I love and I learned one of these from that kid who I mentioned before in the Mitch Marsh story. He said, when I don't swear. Like, I did a swear audit the next day, and mate, I said the F word 25 times before 12 o'clock, and I was with Mitch. I was on a surf trip. Mitch and Kai were going down the coast. Mate, I was shocked. Like, it was sad that I was 43 and I dropped the F-bomb 25 times before midday. And it's been something that I've been really conscious of, and I learnt that from someone who's in grade 11, I'm starting to get lost on it. It's our ability to be open to anyone and learn. Those 1%ers, sorry, that's what I'm saying, the nights in between. So even when I'm out running in the morning, I'll be like, say hello to everyone. Morning, even if they don't say morning back, that teaches me that, hey, they're on their little morning journey. They don't have to say good morning back. It's when I did a run, swim, run race last year, and I made this thing in my head. I was like, I'm going to thank every volunteer on the course, right? I won't win this event. I'm going to give it my best. But the best that I can be on this isn't maybe necessarily where I finish, but it's how I run the race. So every single person that I went past, volunteer, I said either thank you, sir, or thank you, ma'am. There'll be people out there who go, oh, we shouldn't call each other sir or ma'am anymore. But that's their go, right? The journey I'm on. And I loved it. It felt epic. When I got to the end, I'd acknowledged every single volunteer on that course. And I called them sir or ma'am. Like, I love it when I go to a private school and I see a uniform, a suit and a tie, and the pompous stuff, and the respect, and all of these things, these notes in between, or these one percenters that add up, and make us who we can be. Um, I mentioned the young fellow before who's mate, he daily, or at least every 2 or 3 days, will threaten to say, "I'm going to take my own life." And one of the big things I've been trying to teach him or show him is, if you don't get out of bed until midday, you're going to feel like shit, right? You're going to feel awful. You're going to feel lazy and slow. But if you don't even do anything up until that night, right, you just lay in bed and feel sorry for yourself, you're going to be dirty on yourself, right? You've let yourself down. So anything that comes across your desk that day, anyone that comes in front of you, or, pisses you off in any way, or you read into stuff, you're going to react in a really unhealthy way because you're irked. You're rough, and you're not happy with yourself. Whereas if you can get up early, or you can, you say you're doing shift work, you finish shift, the minute you get up, if you can be proactive in your headspace, and you can get outside and do something that you're proud of. Say you're sitting in the coffee shop after it and someone comes past and they act like a dickhead, because you're going good, you'll just go, oh, in your head, you'll go, what a nuffy, and you'll just bloody enjoy your coffee and get going. Whereas if you're having a shitty day and you're playing up, you'll be like, what, mate? Mate, what? Because you've got this anger that you want to get out. You want to show people that you're angry and they've got the shits, and you'll end up doing something stupid. And that pretty much was my life for a really long time. I was always at the shits with myself and angry with myself because of how poorly I was going and treating those around me, that when there was an opportunity to be angry, I would make it all about me. So, yeah, what you're saying, those little one percenters, the notes in between, they're the things that are most special, that make us who we are. The ability to let others around us act like dickheads, maybe, and not have to rile up and get angry back. Just go, oh, that's where they're at on their journey. They're having a shitty day. It's not my issue.
It's funny you say this, Tommy. Like, you mentioned that clip that I shared the other day. I took that from a podcast that I was a guest on earlier this year with a great gent by the name of Chris Griffin. And Chris sent me just a couple of raw files from that pod that I hadn't been exposed to yet. And it was that clip that when I watched it back, it brought a little tear to my eye, because I love my partner Soph more than anything in this world. She's an absolute gem. I feel very lucky every day to have her. And people on the podcast probably get sick of hearing me talk about Soph, but bugger the bloody lot of you, you're here for the long haul. You're going to hear about her a few more times.
Yeah,
and
that's it, mate.
I shared that clip, which was pretty much just a dedication to her. And it's funny, I went a little bit nuts online, and for me, the absolute beauty of that was just seeing all these lads show up in the comment section, tag their partner, and tell them how much they love them. And mate, it felt really special, to feel like, for guys, almost that little bit of a hand on the shoulder saying, hey mate, you're a bloody man if you can tell your missus how much you love her and you can acknowledge her. Doesn't make you less of a man. There's all this bullshit today around, oh mate, get over your missus, you're whipped, don't worry about it, come out with the boys, do this. It's all bullshit, because mate, in the end, your partner is the person that you're there for life with. You're connected to them. They're the person that, if you're privileged enough, as I hope to be, you get to bring some kids into the world together and create a family. And I've noticed time and time again, the more podcasts I go on and the more I talk about my people, be it my beautiful mum and my dad, my sister, my partner Soph, my good mates, the more comments I get from blokes about, more than anything, the thing that I'm acknowledged for the most is people message me and talk about how it's made them reflect on how lucky they are to have people in their life. And I think whilst that is the most significant thing, our connections and our love for our people, sometimes it's that little reminder, and then reminding those people how much they mean to you, that are the little one percenters in their day, that give them the hope that they need, that give them the support that they need. And so I'll bloody shout it till the cows come home, that, tell the people you love how much they mean to you. It's so important.
Yeah, it is, mate. It's it's easy to put shit on people. It's really easy to do that, for some odd reason. It makes us feel better about ourselves if we're in that mindset. you know, it is a hard thing to be able to go up to someone and go, hey, buddy, love how you're operating, you know, because it's an uncomfortable thing for some people. You know, even, you know, I think about, like, mate, make mistakes. Gosh, recently just made it, you know, I was away and with a mate and he's got his stuff and I prodded and poked him too much and we had a boo and you know, we hadn't spoken for months and months. And this morning he came up to me and said, hey, mate, I'm sorry. And I was like, mate, you're sorry. Like, mate, I'm sorry. And I should have come up to you ages ago, you know, like I prodded and poked you. And it was beautiful, just this bloody moment of like, mate, a mate's back in my life. I'm lucky. But I felt a heap of shame and guilt because I wasn't big enough to do it, yet he did it. But, you know, it's uncomfortable crossing the floor of a room and going, hey, I'm sorry. That's hard to do, right? And that can be just as hard as crossing the floor and going, hey, I love you. It's so much easier, like, to sit and go, oh, you're a dickhead, mate, or this or that. And, you know, in a schoolyard terms, young fellas do it. They'll sit on the other side of the room and they'll go, hey, what's that bloke's story? He's a weirdo. He always sits on his own. That's easy to do that. What's hard is to cross the floor in front of everyone, go over to that person who's on their own and go, hey, what's going on, mate? Notice you sit on your own a shitload. Are you all right? You know, like, that's bloody hard to do. And I use it to find your feet. Terminology is turn left or turn right. And my mate, you know, a good mate of mine's brother, Kirsty, his brother came up to me one time. He's done I think he's done 4 or 5 tours of Afghanistan and you know, an amazing fella. And at Kai's wedding speech, I said, you know what, we get this opportunity in life to turn left or turn right. In life, I turned left and I blamed everyone for the stuff and I played the victim, whereas Hursty, he turned right and he took it on and he challenged it and he all the shit stuff that happened to him, he fueled on it and he won all these, mate, and he just became one of the greatest Olympians and bloody watermen of all time, right? And everyone clapped, everyone goes dancing. His brother can't. He goes, hey, Tommy, I love what you said, but it's interesting, isn't it? Like, we don't always get to choose to go left or right. He goes, we do here in Australia, in the free world, but in war we don't. I said, well, what do you mean, mate? And he said, mate, we had one night we're out on tour and like we had to go into this building. There's intel that there's a sniper in there, this, that, and the rest. He said, I got to the doors. There was a little door on the left, a door on the right. And he said, I just forgot where I had to go, just blacked out. And I just ended up following this guy, one of the tallest guys in the platoon. He was on the right-hand side. You know, we go in there and he said all this gunfire goes off next door. He said it's just like noise like you wouldn't believe. He said I ran into the room and there was one of my best mates laying on the ground and been shot. He said I picked him up, threw him over my shoulder, and he said I ran for like 8 kilometres, one of the hardest runs I've ever done. He said his hand was just, all I could feel was, you know, his arm just hit my ear like that. He said, you know, on that night we didn't get a choice left or right. Like, we were told which doors to go in. He said, luckily I went on that door on the right. But for my mate, he got pushed in the door on the left, and you know he ended up in a pretty bad way. And you know, it's the message is like, when you're presented with a challenge, which way are you going to go? You're going to do what I did and blame everyone and say poor me and be the victim and go nowhere, or you're going to go, hey, I've got something to learn here. I'm turning right. I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to get better at it. You know, like that Jocko Willink, he calls it good. You know, when something goes wrong, say good. Why? Because you'll learn from it. You know, when you're running down the driveway and you trip over a tree root that's sticking out from the bloody side, you don't stand back and kick the tree root and blame the tree. You blame yourself because you were the one that tripped over the tree root. Next time you'll learn to jump over it. But, you know, like we get taught to not be accountable. We get taught to blame others or everyone else for what's going on around us. We don't get taught to go, hey, like, what role did you play in it? Yeah, and when that happens in a room, like, mate, I got a kid in my mind now who's bloody, you know, up on the Goldie grade 8. It was amazing. And one young dude stand up, he's like, I got bullied and I get bullied all the time. This legend stands up and goes, mate, I want to apologise to you and probably most of the room. Like, I bully all of you guys. You know, I got heaps of stuff going on at home and I've realised that I come to school and I take it out on you, whereas I should be coming to school and talking with you guys. That's what's going to help me get through my shit instead of coming to school and taking it out on you. and that's a grade 8 boy. Like, that's a grade 8 boy having a left-right moment. Like, he's realised he's been doing the easy stuff, whereas what he needs to do is step up to the challenge and go, hey, fellas, like, I'm struggling. I'm under the whip. So, yeah, so when we're faced with a challenge, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go left and do the easy stuff, or we're going to go right and take it on and grow and be better for it. And just to finish up on that, I mean, big time Aussie culture is to I mean, I grew up with it, was the whole thing of like, mate, don't worry about it, she's a pain in the ass, that sort of talk and that language around wives and mums and that sort of stuff. And again, like, I've turned it around. The men that I hang around with now, they prioritise their wives and their families, and they speak about them in a positive light. And that's something that, for me to be able to do that is, it was hard to do. Like, that was tough in the old days because I wanted it all to be about me. Whereas now to be able to sit back and go, yeah, I'd love to do that with my wife. It'll be great to see her enjoy, her hobbies or her interests. It'd be great just to be alongside her. And, again, maybe that's a little note in between, but it's sort of something, the 1% that I didn't do in the past because I was too busy making it all about me. It didn't work.
Mate, it's funny how life, yeah. Well, it's funny how life will test you, though, when you make a commitment to be better, to show up the way that you know is right. And I recently had one of these experiences in which life pretty quickly said, mate, you hit the ball over this fence. Here's a return serve for you. See what you can do with it. And two of my best mates, who I absolutely adore and love, they're two of the best blokes, and we come from these wildly unique and different backgrounds, and we convene every week for a run and a coffee and a good yarn and a dip in the ocean. And we convene every 6 weeks to sit down on the podcast as three young mates just to have an honest conversation about something that's hard for us in our lives at the moment.
Second? So sorry, my young bloke's ringing. Can I just grab it? Sorry, mate.
Mate, grab it. Yeah, so me and my two really good mates, we convene every week for a coffee, a run, a catch up, to have a yarn, and it's always the best time. And we also convene every 6 weeks or so as three mates to sit down and have a conversation on the podcast. And we always identify a topic in the lead up that is challenging for us or that we're trying to learn more about. And it's usually something that will be relevant to the lives that we're living, right, as young men. And so, we sat down a couple of weeks ago over a coffee and decided to go for a walk because we decided that with the current conversations around domestic violence and sexual assault in Australia, as three young blokes, we wanted to do something to influence other young men, but also for the girls that listen to the podcast and the women in our lives, we wanted them to see an effort from us to own up for some of the locker room chat in the past that all of us blokes can be a part of and find ourselves in. And also to recognize what are the qualities that we want to have as good men and what are the qualities that we want to live by. And so we sat down in conversation, ahead of this podcast to talk a little bit about what we felt would be important to discuss. And right at the end of the coffee, mate, after 2 hours of a chat, I said to the boys, you'd like to think that if given the opportunity to be good men, to step in and maybe be uncomfortable where we had to do something that was right, like to think that we'd show up in the world that way. 2 hours later, walking out of my office in Wollongong in the middle of the city here, and as I'm walking down the street, one headphone in towards my car for a meeting, I hear a scream. It was a loud scream, and so it stops me in my tracks, and I look around, and running in my direction is this poor young woman screaming at the top of her lungs, and she's got this bloke chasing her down the street. And as he's chasing her down the street, I straight away just start running in her direction. I see him grab her by the ponytail, reef her back, have a few stern words with her, and as he sees me running towards him and a few other people, he takes off in the other direction. And so, without making this a long story, I stop. I ask her if she's okay. I ask her if she knows the man that's just assaulted her, to which she says yes, and they're my kids over there with him too. And immediately we have the police being called on the phone, and I'm staying with her, and he's screaming profanities from about 50, 60 yards away, making a big scene in the street, to which he then starts to throw a few profanities at me, and I'm trying to calm him down. He's telling me he's going to crack my head open and crush my skull and all this garbage. And I'm trying to make sure she's fine. And naturally, the motherly instinct in her, she wants to go towards the kids and make sure that they're okay. And I said to her, I really need you to stay here. I'm going to make sure your kids don't get taken away, but I don't want you to get hurt. And anyway, she runs towards this bloke. And as I see him get aggressive as she's coming towards her, I run after her to make sure she's okay. And then he comes at me. We find ourselves in not a scuffle, but I'm able to keep this guy at distance and just relax him and try to calm him. But ultimately, I can't stop her from going in his direction. Anyways, this guy later gets charged. The police get a statement from me. They've done their thing. And one of the things the copper asked me when he's sitting down with me, he says, mate, not many people wanted to do the right thing on that day, but you did. And hopefully it's a reason for this bloke to change his behaviour. And he said, but do you ever see him around town? Have you ever seen him before? And I said, mate, I've never seen this geezer in my life, but I'm sure I will now. Yeah. And I'm telling you, Tommy, nearly every day after that moment, I've seen this guy around town. And I was, if I'm being honest, I knew I'd done the right thing on that day because I don't think any kid should grow up in that environment. And I don't think that any woman should be exposed to that kind of behaviour. And I know that this guy needed someone to step in and say, mate, you're doing the wrong thing here. You need to pull your head in because you're better than that. And drugs were involved and a bunch of other things. But it addressed something uncomfortable in me because I proceeded to see this guy every day from then on. And I'd see him around town and I'd become sort of hyper aware, which made me very empathetic to the women who feel uncomfortable when they're walking around these environments in Wollongong here or across the world for that matter. And as I'm walking through all of these areas in town, I keep spotting this guy. I don't know if he's spotted me yet, but it brought up something in me where there was a little bit of resentment because I see him walking around with his partner and the kids. And I'm going, God, I feel uncomfortable because I don't trust this fella. But then they're living their life, moving on from that moment. And I remember sitting down with the boys and with my partner and saying, I feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I feel like I've done the right thing. And sometimes I guess it's uncomfortable to be a good man. And then just on Friday, I'm having a coffee and a bit of tucker down at one of the local cafes, and I'm kind of aware of my surroundings. So I sit up beside one of these walls and sort of position myself so I can see everything that's happening around me. And there around the corner walks this fella, his partner and the kids. And I'm watching him walk towards me, and I'm sitting there on my chair and I'm like, I feel pretty helpless sitting here in my chair. But I lock eyes with this fella and he locks eyes with me, and I just nod my head. And as he gets close to me, I'm thinking, well, there's either two things that happen here. This guy's going to unleash all hell on me and get all the anger out, or he's going to say something. And he stops beside me and he goes, mate, I am so sorry for the other day. I just want to apologize. And then his partner goes, and I want to thank you so much. And he shakes my hand and I shake his, and they walk off. And I remember sitting there after that moment and going that maybe the optimist in me wants to believe that this guy's going to change for the better, that he's going to treat his partner with the love and care she deserves, that he's going to be a good dad to his kids. And I don't know the outcome of that. But you have to reserve yourself to the fact that if you know what's right and you show up in the world that way, some things are out of your control, but you can certainly control the way that you show up. And, but for me, it made me address some stuff that was uncomfortable. It made me address, am I going to have the courage to show up that way? Am I going to work on the things to make sure that I can move through the world as a good man, regardless of some of the costs, regardless of some of that discomfort? And it was an honest challenge, mate, that tested me a little bit, but it's for me finding new levels in what I need to give myself to know I can show up that way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's about heading into the uncomfortable spaces, in whether you're trying to do good or whether you're trying to sort your own stuff out. Mate, I just sat in the comfortable forever, That's like the other day I stood out in front of the Queensland Origin, the 18 boys, and I was like, boys, I'm nervous as batshit, like I'm shaking, but I love it because all I ever did was shit that didn't make me shake, that didn't make me nervous. So yeah, you grow, don't you? Every time you go for a run, you run 5Ks, you're prepping yourself to be able to run 8Ks the next day or the next week. And that's got to be the mindset, really, hasn't it? That with every opportunity,
100%.
yeah, there comes growth, and there comes that ability to either help someone, but most importantly, when you help yourself, you're helping everyone around you. That's the beauty of that. Yeah.
Mate, I want to close us off here today by just getting a reminder for everyone of your mate Bastion's advice for his
Yeah.
mates, but
Ripper.
also a little bit of a testimony from you for everyone who's listening, something that you think would be valuable for them to hear, that would have an impact on them in their lives and has certainly impacted you.
Mate, look, the biggest one is for me, it was just for so long, I just played that victim. Unfortunately, I don't speak to my old man anymore. A kid asked me that day, he goes, "What's your relationship like with your dad?" And I said, "Unfortunately, it's not there anymore." But that's a boundary that I've set to keep myself safe, my heart safe, and then when I do that, I'm keeping my family safe. So I'm making them a priority. It's sad that it's like that in a way, but it's also it's sad that I'll never climb Mount Everest. But the reason I won't climb Mount Everest is because I don't have the skills and the tools, and I probably couldn't do it. And it's probably the same with my old man. It's sad that we'll probably never speak ever again. But I've tried so many times to climb that mountain that I'm sick of getting hurt. I'm sick of falling over and getting frostbite. But mate, the big one is, the legacy that Bass left is, it's not all about you, right? Like in his 6 months that he had left here on Earth, mate, he was just, it was all about everyone else. Like one of the last times I saw him, I walked into his little bedroom, mate, in Camden in southwest Sydney, and mate, he looked 100. Like this is a beautiful little Tiwi Island fella who had a big frizzy black hair, and he was just a ripper. And mate, he looked like Gandhi. Like he was gone. He was wrapped in his white sheet, and just his little head was sticking out. And mate, I leant in and went to kiss him on the forehead to say goodbye, and mate, he just reefed me in, and he ripped me in, and that moment, like he said in that moment, "Don't F this up." Like in my head, that's what I took from it. Don't F this up. Like he was like, "I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I don't get a choice. I'm dying tonight. But you get a choice. What are you gonna do with it?" And like I said, it wasn't another 3 years till I completely capitulated and fell over. But in those 3 years, worse than ever, it was all about me. Any opportunity to get pissed and argue with someone, most importantly, my mum, even though, she was one of the ones who reached out and tried so hard to get me help, I still would argue with her and be rude to her. And the funny thing was, too, I was kind to my old man. I'd try to be nice with him, even though he was the one who moved, 2,500 kilometres away. But, this whole thing around it being all about me just dragged everyone into my vortex. And when I fully took that on and learnt, the damage that I was doing and the way that I was, behaving like that child and, that wounded 10-year-old boy and not a functioning adult. And the minute I was given those ultimatums that I had to lift my standard, else I was gone, that was when the journey started. And like whoever's listening and whatever your journey is don't bullshit yourself. You might have an amazing woman in your life and she's got the shits with the shitty behaviour you're doing, and you're saying shit to her or your mates like, "You know what, I don't need to be told that I can't have a beer. I don't need to be told this." Well, you know what? Maybe you effing do. Maybe you do need to be told. If you've got a woman in your life who's telling you to pull your head in and you're behaving like a dickhead, you're blessed. So if you've got a woman in your life or a bloke in your life who's allowing you to behave like a dickhead, well, that's when you're struggling, right? That's when you need to reach out and find genuine people around you. And again, for me, that's when it all changed. That's when everything turned around, and I started to instead of running home from the pub at 3 a.m. in the morning fully pissed, I got up and I'd be running marathons. So yeah, it's a big question, but don't make it about yourself. That's my that's my message. Because it's easy to make it about yourself, isn't it? It's easy to just go on and feel sorry for yourself and feel sad. But what's hard is to look in the mirror and go, shit, I got a problem. But as well as that, to get excited about that, like that's it. Like even just then, like you can hear me, I lift on that. I get excited on that shit. I love it. I walked into my counsellor the other day and I said, Lizzie, I said, I don't know if I'm behaving like an adult. She said, what do you mean, darling? She's nearly 80. She's a ripper. And I said, I just don't know. Like, am I back? And she goes, well, what's been going on? I said, oh, I wrote this text to my old man to say enough's enough and see you later. And this is why. And she said, well, that sounds like what an adult would do in my world. A child would yell and kick and scream, and you've put it down. You've said this is what you need to say, and by the sound of it, you're moving on. Well done. So, yeah, mate, that'd be it. The legacy would be, don't make it about you. Be proactive in your stuff. Go out, get after it. Stop pissing and moaning, and that's when you find your feet. Like that's the moment where you go, shit, this is good. This challenge is good. This growth is good. And I'm going to go after it. Yeah, that's the thing, mate. For me to finish on, like I rarely, I don't speak about Bass in these ways. It's a great question, like yeah, if that far out. If that young fella didn't come into my life, if that lady wasn't selling chocolates that night at 2UE when I was working in Sydney, I wouldn't be here in this house. I wouldn't be married. I probably wouldn't be alive, mate. And I wouldn't have worked with over 50,000 kids or young people. I just wouldn't be where I am in my life. And, mate, I'm still mates with his mum and dad, Joe and Claire, and they're beautiful people. They lost their son, and I was only thinking about him in the surf a couple of hours ago, going, how do you move through that and do what they're doing in the way they're doing it? And they don't get a choice, right? They don't get a choice, but they've gone right, and they're just beautiful people. And yeah, mate, I'm probably rambling on it now because shit, for a long time I probably haven't sat and thought about the great man in what he's done. He's not even here, physically he's not, but his message is, and wow, bloody good question, mate. Maybe middle stump me. You got me.
Mate,
Rarely does that
mate,
happen, mate. Rarely I'm stuck for words. Yeah.
Well, mate, you answered it bloody beautifully, and I think anyone who's listening or watching can see what that young man meant to you and the legacy that he's left with you and with so many. And I just want to say, mate, to leave you with a few words. A recent guest on my podcast, Ali Tarai, said to me that, Brad, sometimes in our life we have champions who come into our life and they allow us to see a bit of potential that we don't recognize in ourselves. They open some doors for us. They give us some guidance when we need it. They light the path ahead so that we can walk and see a little bit of light and a bit of future that's there for us. And sometimes in our life, we have the opportunity to be champions for other people. And mate, let me tell you, Tommy, you are an absolute champion for so many people, for thousands of children who need someone through their own struggles and their own hardship. You're shining a light on their own brilliance for them to see themselves in the full light that they should. And mate, for people like myself who are so inspired by the work that you do and want to do some good in the world, mate, you're an absolute champion for myself. So I want to thank you so much for the work you're doing, for your time today, brother.
Mate, I appreciate it, legend. I wanted to add this. Always keep asking yourselves questions. Like I got one in my head from a counsellor when I see her in a fortnight, is why can't I accept praise? Why can't I accept it when people say you're doing a great job? I don't know why I can't. If it's because of the wounded boy, like I'm sitting at Brizzy Airport the other day and Sam Thaiday came over, who Queensland, a great bloke, and he said, mate, I just want to let you know, I really appreciate what you're doing. And I just looked at him and I got up and I chewed his bloody ear off for half an hour and I caught myself trying to validate myself, even though he'd done it. And I simply could have just gone, oh, thanks, Sam, buddy, appreciate it. But I got on the plane going, why can't you ever just take kind words that people say. And, I can wallow and worry and fester and put that question off to the side and let it only come up in times when I'm lost. Or I can go, I'm going to ask a professional about that because it's bloody interesting. Why can't I? And, mate, I'm genuinely bloody excited about working out why I can't. And my counsellor will tell me. And that, to me, is exciting. Like, that's growth. That's, yeah. So always keep asking yourself questions of yourself. How can I be better and why is this going on? And be curious. Always say to young fellas, be curious with your mates and use language like, oi. You can say to them stuff like, oi, dickhead, what's going on? You're bloody acting like you got a sore thumb. You got the shits, have you? Tell me what's going on. I love you. And they'll go, yeah. So use language that's comfortable. And just be open to it. But, mate, thanks so much for inviting me on and chatting and putting up with my answers that are longer than a Steve Monaghetti training run. But appreciate it, legend. You're a champion. Thanks for chasing too. It's good.
Mate, my absolute pleasure. Good to speak to you, Tommy.
Cheers, legend.